Hello and welcome to The Journey Home. I'm your host, Marcus Grodi, and tonight we have another special episode from our recent trip to Scandinavia. This week we travel to both Sweden and Norway, where we first meet Maria Hasselgren, whose journey led her to become the press officer for the Catholic Church in Sweden. Maria, we welcome you to The Journey Home.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to meet you, and thank you for taking the time to share your journey on The Journey Home. Before we start with your story, though, very quickly, tell the audience what you do for a living.
I am the press officer for the Catholic Church in Sweden, so I handle all the media relations, particularly for our Bishop Anders, and things happening on a national level. So it's a very interesting job because I'm paid to read the newspapers and watch TV and keep an eye on what is said and written about the Catholic Church.
Get the right word out there sometimes, but correct.
We try, and actually we can see a growing interest in the Catholic Church, and also generally, of course, in spiritual issues. And we are grateful every time, of course, the Catholic Church is on the agenda. And it's easier now when we have younger journalists who are maybe not have that much knowledge, but they are interested and open.
Well, the reason I wanted to mention that first is because, like many of us, you're doing a job that you probably never dreamed you'd do when you were younger.
No, that's true. That's definitely true.
So what I usually do in the program is invite the guest to begin, to back up a little bit and give us a little summary of your early spiritual journey, if you would.
Well, I was brought up in a typical Swedish home, I would say. I grew up only with my mother. My parents were divorced, and I didn't have much of a spiritual education. My mother sent me to like preschool Christian teaching in the Lutheran church, where I was a member. Of course, I was baptized and everything, and you went to church. In Sweden, you go to church on the 1st of Advent. That is very important, and everybody do that, even though they are not very religious, and so did I. But I think actually what my mother did, which was important to me, was that we traveled a lot. Since we were only two in the family, it was easy to travel mainly to the middle Mediterranean countries. And of course you do all the tourist tours and visited churches and so. And I remember
You can't miss the Catholic Church.
You can't miss the Catholic Church if you go to Italy and Spain and so on. And I think it made a deep impression on me because as a child, you can understand things on a deeper level. And for me, I felt very deeply that here is something important going on. This is for real. This is serious. And when I compared that to the school ministers coming to school and they were playing the guitar, and it was sort of, that is also a way of reaching out to young people, of course, but for me, I think I'm more serious-minded, so for me it was like going into a Catholic church, that was something different, and it spoke to a deeper level in me, and which actually is interesting because later on, when I worked for the Catholic newspaper, we did a research when we asked questions to people who had converted to the Catholic Church, and almost everybody who answered this research, these questions, said that what had actually made them start this process to convert was that they had went into a Catholic Church and they felt that God is present here, and that was unregard what kind of background they had. If they were Lutherans, if they were New Age, if they were completely secularized, the process started with going into a Catholic church and this strong feeling of a presence. And this was also something for me. But actually, when I was 14, I wrote in my diary that if I ever become religious, I should become Catholic. But it didn't mean that much to me at the time, and I was a rather outgoing.
You weren't particularly leaning towards being religious, but if you ever became religious, you'd become Catholic.
If I should be very mean, I should say that I had some friends in class, in school, in high school, who were what we say free religious or free Christians, or more like Pentecostals, and they had a very forbidding religiosity that didn't speak that much to me because they were forbidden to use makeup, to go out dancing, to play cards. Things that maybe were not that important to me, but it was sort of a religiosity that I didn't feel at home with that. Very restrictive, and so I felt somehow that this should not have something to do with the faith somehow, in a sense. But during my teenage years, I always came back somehow to God, that God was important, but I didn't have that character or strength, so to say yes to this, because I could not relate to the people I had around me who were actually practicing Christians, because it was a Christianity that was it wasn't for me. I didn't feel at home with that. But then I moved to Uppsala. I come from a small town in the north of Sweden, and I moved to Uppsala, which is one of the big university cities in Sweden. And I started study history, and then I went on to study theology. And actually, I started study theology mainly because I wanted to study church history. But somehow, and I could sort of say that maybe it was God's hand, it made me, things happen and maybe stay on and continue my theological studies.
So you really went into theological studies not so much because you were driven by faith, you were interested in the history of it more?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of, may sound weird, but I'm pretty wild also.
God uses a variety of things. I mean,
yeah, but I was pretty wild also. I mean, I did a lot of work for student organizations and were out partying and so on. And I think that was also part of my journey, I think. And it's, for me, I mean, I wouldn't recommend other people to do that, but still it was part of who I were at that time. But eventually I actually were picked out to go on a field trip to South Africa, and this was in 1987, and I was going to do my pre-doctoral studies. I never wrote a doctoral later on, but I did a pre-doctoral study on women in the liberation movement in South Africa, with particular focus on the church of Christian women. And this was in 1987, and when apartheid was still very strong in South Africa. And it was a very difficult time. And I ended up living in a Catholic family, or part of the Catholic family, because the husband was actually detained for his anti-apartheid work. And I was living with his wife and a friend of hers that stayed in the house so she could feel sort of secure. And of course, this made a huge impression on me, because her Catholic faith was very important to her, also for change, gave her strength to work for a change in society. And the Catholic Church was very much involved in the change in South Africa. That meant a lot to me, actually. And I decided then that I have to start this process. I have to take this seriously, that God is calling me, and I have to make a decision somehow that I have to give God a chance in my life, because when I look back, I sort of feel that since I were 14, 15, I was sort of pulled back and forth, and God tried to reach out, and I said, no, I'm not ready yet. Oh no, it's not me. I cannot be. I'm not a Christian. No, I can't be. And then I sort of. But it was always.
Augustine said something like that. Lord, make me holy, but not yet.
Not yeah, something like that. Though no other comparison with Saint Augustine. But it was sort of. I mean, I could see that afterwards, and it was sort of going back and forth, and I tried to pray, but I don't think I had the calm within to really understand what God was saying to me and accept what he was saying, maybe. But when I were in South Africa and when I came home, I realized that this is important to me, and I have to do something about it. And since I was then engaged, or got engaged afterwards, to my husband, and he was very active in the Lutheran Church, I thought, well, okay, I give the Lutheran Church a try, because it would sort of still be easier, since the Catholic Church is in minority, and should we have two churches in the family, it could be difficult. But I never really felt at home in the Lutheran Church. I felt very strongly that this is not for me, and I had no, compared to my husband, who is still a member of the Lutheran Church, I never had any loyalties to the Lutheran Church, so to speak, because I took a very firm decision when I was 14 not to be confirmed in the Lutheran Church, which actually upset my grandfather quite a lot, because I were the oldest of the cousins, and my decision, actually none of my cousins got confirmed. So it was difficult. But I got a Bible actually when I turned 14, which I read and decided that no, I'm not a Christian, I'm not prepared for this. So, but I still felt when I started to still accept that maybe I should give God a chance, that the Lutheran Church might be something, but I never felt at home. I did my best, but I never really felt that this is for me. So I joined a course in the Catholic Church in Uppsala, which is for just to come to know the Catholic faith. Yeah. And I spent 6 months in that group, and then one day I searched out the priest, Father Bishop Berger, and told him that I wanted to convert, and he was completely shocked. He said, you are the most Lutheran person I ever met. You're the most critical person I ever had on the course. And I said, well, I had to check out that your answers were strong enough for me that you could convince me, and you have. So then we started out on the more personal the talks and what I had to read, and since I had then I was close to graduating from my theological studies. It was not a very long process though, but we decided to wait till after my marriage, since my husband had decided to remain in the Lutheran Church. So we waited till after we had got married, and then I converted. And for me it was a big day. Yeah. It was. And an important day, of course, since afterwards I have come to also work for the Catholic Church. At the time when I converted, I worked for the Pentecostal newspaper, which also was important for me because I came to know other Christians in another way than I had when I was a teenager. And you are more open-minded maybe when you're a bit older. And then I worked for the Christian Peace Movement, which is also an ecumenical organization. But then I was asked to start to work for the Catholic newspaper, and I worked there for a long time. And during that time also I did a lot of work for representing the church in media, representing the church in ecumenical issues, and then eventually Bishop Anders asked me to do this work, which I do now as press officer. So my life the Catholic Church has really become a huge part of my life, not only private and spiritually, but also for a living.
Yeah, and with your husband working for the Lutheran Church and you work for the Catholic Church, it makes interesting dinner conversations.
Yes, it does. And we have, of course, many friends both in the Lutheran Church and in the Catholic Church, so it's quite interesting, though our son is brought up a Catholic.
All right. So, now, you, in your journey from the Lutheran faith to the Catholic faith, and you also knew the Pentecostal faith because you worked for them, and also you worked with the ecumenical movement. Was there some struggles in accepting some of the Catholic doctrines and such that were a bit different than your Lutheran upbringing?
I think as many converts, one of the things that I had to struggle with to start with was the primacy of the Pope, because it's something that is very... Because sort of the Lutheran Church started there with the criticism of the Pope, so that was something I struggled with. But later on, I have come to more appreciate the role of the Holy Father as the symbol and the person that holds together the Church. So that is something very important to the Catholic Church. That it's, and maybe I also had some problems with women issues, so to speak. But at the same time, I could early on recognize that women had a much stronger part in the Catholic Church. Actually, not only the Holy Virgin, but also all the strong saints like Saint Bridget, who is not put down woman in any way. Right. There are many strong female role models in the Catholic Church, and which is important to me. And I think those. I mean, it was never a problem for me that the Catholic Church don't have female priests or so, because that was never a calling of mine, I don't have a problem with that at all, and never had. It was more like I felt, well, is this... Because that is always the question I get when I'm at the dinner and someone asks me and they find out what I do and they understand, of course, that I'm Catholic. And the second question is always, and your husband is Catholic also? As if I could not take that stand or become a Catholic on my own, as on my own decision. It has to be something that comes from my husband. That really upsets me, actually. But because I think... women's issues are important to me. Also,
well, it emphasizes that it's an individual choice, and we have to decide for ourselves.
Yes, exactly, and the church would not accept anything else.
Right, exactly.
So
now, on our table here, we have this wonderful book, which I may need you to read the title, because I can't read Swedish. But tell us about how this book came about.
The book's name is 25 frågor och svar om katolsk tro, and 25 questions and answers about Catholic faith. And the background is that when Swedish teenagers are about 14, 15, they study the Catholic Church in school, and they often then try to visit Catholic parishes. And people working in the Catholic Church who were guiding these people, these young people, they wanted something to help them answer questions that the young people have. And it's usually the ordinary questions like, what about the Pope, abortion, contraceptives, divorce, all these basic, so to speak, questions. And I were asked to write something simple that they could use in reaching out to the young people. So I started working on this book, and my husband and I were actually living in Hong Kong at the time for a year. My husband was teaching there. And after a while, Ulrika, who is the editor, and me, we realized that, well, maybe we should broaden the focus a bit, because generally Swedes are not so much, they don't have much knowledge about faith or about Christianity, and definitely not about the Catholic Church. It's more prejudiced. And therefore we decided to make it more for also be able to be used among adults when you reach out to journalists, to people visiting church. And then they printed 4,000 copies in January this year. And actually it became so popular in the parishes, they decided to print another 40,000 because the priests realized that this is something that is easy to read, it's basic Catholic catechism, and it can be used to hand out to people who are getting married, to parents coming to baptize their children, to those who are confirmed, to converts, as sort of a start to understand what Catholic faith is about.
Well, that's neat. I know that on the screen for our audience they'll be able to see the website. But why don't you say it for those who are listening? It's
www.kpn.se, kpn.se.
Okay, excellent. And thank you for that. Another thing that you mentioned, which kind of connects a bit with your work as well as your life, when we were talking a moment ago, you mentioned that there were several really big events that has opened Sweden to the Catholic faith in a way that wasn't true before.
No.
Maybe even not true in your childhood.
No.
Right.
I mean, what is important for people to understand is that the Christian faith came to Sweden about 1,000 years ago with Catholic monks. And the Catholic Church were present in Sweden for more than 500 years before the Lutheran Reformation, when the Catholic Church was banned. And it was actually, I mean, if Swedes became Catholics, they could be executed. So the Catholic Church was very much present in Sweden, and also, I mean, we had Catholic bishops, we had Catholic monasteries and everything, but all this was forbidden for several hundred years. And then when the Church came back, it was sort of, because when the state of Sweden was founded in the 16th century, it was sort of in opposition to the Catholic Church. So hating the Catholic Church and regarding the Catholic Church as the enemy was sort of inherent in Swedish society. And when the Church came back at the end of the 19th century and then during the 20th century, for a very long time, Catholics was regarded as something foreign, as something strange, as something alien, as something antichrist. I mean, you could really see that also people within the Lutheran Church and in the Pentecostals and so on they talked about the Catholic Church as something that doesn't belong here, that it's something odd and something curious and something not to be taken seriously, it's dangerous. But then in 1989, for the first time ever, a Holy Father visited Sweden and visited the Nordic countries in June 1989. And it was, of course, John Paul II, and as we all know, he was a very charismatic person and a strong personality. And you could see the tide turning, that media was so interested, and it was a huge ecumenical success and a huge success in media, that people were actually interested in the Catholic Church, what the Catholic Church actually stands for, and not the typical prejudice. And this was very interesting. You could definitely see a change. And then 3 years ago, you could also see that when John Paul II, even when he died, he had an enormous spiritual impact on people. And because I was in charge of everything we did during that time when John Paul II died, and the interest was huge. And media was so positive. And as I told you before, it was only one newspaper who wrote something really horrible, and that was actually written by a Catholic. So it was people were very upset about that. But even the most liberal and generally anti-religious media was very interested and very positive and very nuanced in what they wrote, which I think is also important, that you have an open analysis of what, in that case, John Paul II had meant, but also what the role the Catholic Church plays in people's personal lives, but also in society and in politics and so on. And I was very happy about how they covered when he was lying on his deathbed and also afterwards. And there were 2 TV channels who actually broadcasted the funeral, which is, if someone had said that 10 years ago, no one would have believed it would happen.
Are you seeing that this has had an effect on the average Swede out in the street?
I think, yes, people got a more positive picture of the Catholic Church, or a more nuanced picture, because generally, since I read all the newspapers and I get all the press clips and everything what is written about the Catholic Church, it's always about abortion, and homosexuality is, of course, a big issue these days. And it's always, I think people in general it's problematic for people to get the Catholic Church together, because on the one hand, you write about the Catholic Church on the sexual issues, and the Catholic Church is conservative, and yes, you can't deal with the Catholic Church, it's horrible, and it's anti-women and anti-homosexuals and all this. On the other hand, there is a strong support of the Catholic Church, but for instance, John Paul II supporting unions in Latin America, social issues, that you have the right to earn a living, that you have a right to a good life, and all this. And people can't understand, they don't understand that these issues actually come from the same source, the dignity of the person, of the individual, and that your anti-abortion and anti-euthanasia and all this has something to do with the fact that you are also in favor of writers' wages and social justice and all this, that they stem from the same source. And this is so difficult to make people understand, actually, and I think that's what we try to do. I do it in my way, and the people I work with, and the priests and everybody in their way. And I think that is something that people don't really understand.
Sometimes it takes grace to work in hearts and minds to even be open to hear that aspect of the truth. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that you have somebody watching that right now is where you were. Maybe Lutheran in name, but really not knowing the faith very well. Any word of encouragement you'd like to pass along to them about your journey, their own journey?
Take the plunge, I would say. For me, it was so, I think it's important to give God a chance, give the Catholic Church a chance, because it's actually a journey, and it doesn't finish with taking that step, becoming a Catholic. It's a process that continues, and it deepens, and you discover things about yourself, about God, that is, it will change you, and it will change you in a positive way, because it will give you a strength that maybe you thought wasn't there. And for me, when I took a decision, I have to give God a chance. And then he gave me that chance. I gave God a chance, and he has given me so many chances. And of course, you can always have that little thought in your back head, I can get out of this if I want to, but actually you don't want to when you have taken that step. Yeah.
Maria, thank you so much for your witness and for your work for the church. We appreciate it. And what's the name of that book again?
25 frågor och svar om katolsk tro.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us on this half of the Journey Home program. God bless you. See you in a little bit.
Welcome back. Now on to our Norwegian interview with talented composer Alida Hafvik Drolsen. Coping for years with struggles born from mental illness, she turned to the church, where through the nuns in Larvik, she discovered new light, hope, and joy. Alida, welcome to the Journey Home. It's a great pleasure to meet you, to have you here as a part of the Journey Home program. Thank you very much for taking this time. You're a musician, right? That's one of the things you do is...
Well, yes, I try to.
Okay.
I'm a composer more than a singer, but I compose music and I try to do as best as possible at that.
And that plays into your journey, doesn't it? The music
It definitely
aspect.
plays into my journey, yes.
Okay,
it's a big part of that.
Okay, good. We'll come to that later because I want to back up a little bit. And what we usually do in the Journey Home is we invite our guests to let the audience know where you came from spiritually, your early background. So as most Norwegians, were you brought up officially a part of the state church?
Well, no.
Okay.
My parents, they were very idealistic, but they were not Christians at the time when I was born. So they didn't baptize me when I was a child because they wanted to. They didn't feel they could give me the right, appropriate education to be a Christian, so they wanted me to make my own choice.
Oh, okay.
They wanted, and they always...
It's actually very common for a lot of families out of the 50s and 60s.
It is. Yeah, they were a little bit hippie culture parents,
right. Oh, really? So they came out of that 60s culture themselves?
Yeah, they did, actually, yeah.
So they want to let you decide for yourself?
Let me decide for myself, which has been a quite challenging journey. But
so let me ask you this, because I'm also wondering, a lot of our viewers, most of them are Christians all their life. They probably can't even imagine a life not even thinking about a God and a creator. But that's how you were essentially brought up, is that right?
Well, it's a life where you feel quite different from other than people around you, and you are very conscious that you are different. And at least I was. And when I was a child, I think I've always been a spiritual child. I was searching, and I believed there was something else than me, but I was brought up to be very critical to Christianity and everything around death. And I never felt home. During school, I often went to the church with the school and everything, but I never really felt at home in that church either. So it was challenging to be different. Yeah.
Did you? So it's interesting. To a certain extent, it wasn't that your parents exactly kind of let you choose for yourself, because in the process they did
they
give you some anti.
Yeah, they did, without wanting to, of course.
Right.
But of course they did. Yeah.
Did you find yourself having to defend your position against your friends or your classmates at ever?
Yes, I remember especially at the time when during confirmation time, when there was a lot of thinking, and all my friends were wondering about spiritual things, and I also was wondering. So I actually signed up for the Christian confirmation and the non-Christian confirmation, which we have in Norway. It's a quite strange phenomenon.
A non-Christian confirmation?
Non-Christian confirmation, because they believe it's a right to have a sort of stage to the adult life.
A rite of passage into adulthood, yes.
And I tried to be a Christian at that point, and I did both the educations actually, but I didn't feel quite at home in the state church. No.
Did you go through some catechetical training at that point to understand the Lutheran faith?
Yes, I did. And,
okay. But it just didn't...
There were parts of it that suited me very much, but there were parts that I couldn't they didn't feel right at that time. Mm.
All right, so you leave the rite of passage behind. So did you go through the non-Christian confirmation? Mm-hmm. So that
actually, yes.
I guess we wouldn't see that as a sacramental.
No, it's nothing to do with sacraments. It's just sort of a special day with your family, nothing more. Mm.
So, again, from that point on, so you lived for a while in this non-religious mindset, is that right?
That's true, and I was a very conscious child. I tried to be very idealistic, and I thought that what I was doing was very right, that I was emotionally and intellectually doing the right thing by choosing not to become a Christian at that point. Yes.
All right. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that you told me off the set that part of your struggle at this point in time was also you were struggling with some depression issues.
Yes, I early began, and in my family there's been a lot of these things on my father's side, and I have this illness called. I got this illness when I was 16, I think. That's called schizoaffective disorder, and it's partly manic depressive and partly schizophrenic. So, yeah.
So it's something you inherited as a part of your father?
Somehow I inherited, yes, but it also has to do with the way you lead your life, the background, and they usually say inheritance and environment.
All right, combination of both. So you started to experience the phenomena of this when you were 16?
Yeah, I think so. A bit earlier, a few times, but 16, I think, yeah. The year when I was going at a musical high school me and my mother, because my parents were divorced at that time, and me and my mother, we moved to this larger town, and I began at a musical high school. And I think that at this point my mind was sort of overloaded with negativity and stress, and I began sort of to drift into another world, the way I see it.
A musical high school?
A musical high school, yes.
What's that?
That's a form of high school where you can get your diploma, so you can go to university, but you can also do a lot of creative things like drama, like dance, like composing, things like that. But I dropped out after 2 years, and then I...
partially because of the
depression, definitely because of that. I went to institutions and was committed to hospitals, and it became too challenging to live in both the worlds. And I was all the time a very searching person, but and I tried, at times, to be in different kinds of churches and environments, but I never found anything that was right for me. I even tried things like astrology and alternative medicine and things like that, but nothing was right, of course. And at the time when I was 20, I think I had left the musical high school. I hadn't touched the guitar for 3 years because it was too tough to be...
Was that your main instrument, your guitar?
My main instrument at the musical high school, yes. And still, I have hesitated a bit to play guitar, but I didn't try to touch it for 3 years. And then something began to happen. We moved to a new town in the south coast of Norway. A beautiful town by the coast. I said that. But there something began to happen subconsciously, and I began to compose. So all of a sudden, I began to write my own music, because there was something that made me sit down with the guitar once again. And through different kinds of artistic expressions, something very Catholic became to appear, actually, because I remember drawing pictures, for example, if you understand what I mean, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I would draw. I'd always draw what comes into mind, and I would draw, for example, a convent or a nun and things like that. But I was not a Christian. No, I didn't even think about that. I didn't consider it. But
could you identify what you were drawing?
Yes, of course. I knew it was Catholic, and I knew that when I did so, I felt peaceful. When I did those things, one of the very first songs that I composed was a song called Ave Maria, actually. And
where did that come from? Right? I mean, that's what you're asking yourself at the time.
Yes, at least a lot of people were asking themselves those questions. I myself was more didn't see it from that point of view at that time. Mm-hmm. But in that lyrics, the lyrics in the Ave Maria song is about two girls, and both of them are broken down by depression, and one of them rises up in Christ, and the other one just is so scared from taking that step and doesn't want to take that step. And I thought that person would be me for the rest of my life, because there was something sort of I denied myself the right to become Christian. This must sound strange, but
no,
okay. And but then I was at the therapy lesson actually with a psychologist, and she was not a Christian herself. But when she saw my drawings, she said that, have you ever thought about the Catholic Church, Alida? She said. And she also said, I know there's some beautiful nuns here in Larvik, because she had heard about them. and this longing began to appear in me. I had to do something about it in the end, because I was longing to contact this church that someone had told me about. I didn't know it existed in Larvik because it's so small. It was very small then. We have a beautiful new church now. But, I remember sitting down one night, and I had this great longing to call, and I had found the number to the convent with these beautiful nuns, and I dialed the number, and I remember a woman voice answering, saying, yes, hello, and I said, yeah, hi, this is Alida Håvik Drolsum. I was wondering, how do you become a Catholic? And she said, well, that's a big question. Maybe you should come down here and talk to us. And so I did. I went to Mass, and it was a small Mass in a little old electric house building, actually, I think, something like that. And the nuns were living upstairs. And there was Father Joseph from Larvik. He was having a small Mass, everyday Mass, and they talked to me afterwards, and I talked with Sister Frances. It's my very good friend from the monastery now. And I think she always remembers one of the first things she asked me was, what attracts you with the Catholic Church? And I said something like, mystery and the sacraments and baptism and she said that she says that she has always remembered that, especially for me.
She mentioned that to me when she first told me about your journey. Mm-hmm. So you meet with the nuns, and you express this mystery. I'm wondering, because what's kind of ironic is that's what was missing in your non-Catholic confirmation. There's no mystery. There's no sacrament. But that's what the other kids had received.
Yes, and the presence in the Catholic churches is something quite different from the state churches, which are fine in their way, but they haven't got the sacrament of Christ standing there all the time. So I haven't got this special presence that I sensed immediately as I walked in, and I felt there was something right here. But I was struggling still. So I began to take some lessons to become a Catholic, actually. This was in 2002, I think. And, I was still struggling. I was beginning to feel that I was living in two worlds. One with my family, friends, school, everything.
Because very much humanistic.
Yes, because at that time I was finishing high school 2 years late. I was finishing it at a normal high school, and I was also on medications and still ill every day. But So I withdrew from the church. I wrote a very polite letter saying, "This is very nice, but thank you, no thank you." And then I went out in the world again for a couple of years and didn't enjoy myself very much. I remember, and then at one time I had this manic psychosis again that I had a few times in my life, where I drifted into another world, and I was recovering from this at an institution.
Does this illness kind of come and go at times, as opposed to being a constant struggle for you? Or?
It's a constant struggle emotionally. It has been a constant struggle emotionally. I'm doing much better now, actually, but
during this period you had left. You kind of said, "Don't call me, I'll call you," and you've left the thing.
Yeah.
But you started having some of those struggles again.
Yes, I really struggled. And did you ask me something about my illness? I was just going to
answer. Was it something that's a constant, or it comes in strength?
Constant. Well, no, it's the psychosis. They only came when I didn't have my medications.
Ah, okay.
So medications are an important factor too.
All right.
For me, at least. Well. Yes, I was at this institution, and I was really depressed and very down and everything. And it was just before Christmas, and I began thinking. I think this was 2004, or yes. And I began thinking, what is Christmas really about? It's about family, and I began thinking about Christ, and then I was thinking, well, maybe I should take a trip to the state church at Christmas Eve. That would be nice, and I really want to do that. And then I just knew it in my heart, I have to be a Catholic. Something happened inside me at that point, and I never regretted since then. I just sort of knew that this was the right thing. So I went out on the parking lot with my cell phone, which I had, and I searched for the number, and I found it at the monastery, back at the old monastery in Larvik, and I called, and Sister Francis answered the phone again, and I said, "Hi, do you remember me?" And she did, and at this point of time, there was a lot of things happening in Larvik, because Catholic Church, because the sisters had grown, and the monastery had grown, and they had built this beautiful monastery up by a lake and a forest overlooking the hills of Larvik, and they were also building this beautiful new church, and the congregation, and well. I began training again. I was still at the institution, so they were very skeptical at the institution. Yeah, they were, what is she doing now? She is unstable. She is, but and I wasn't even baptized as a child, you know. So after I think 6 months, I was received into the church, and I was baptized. By Father Joseph in the church. I had 2 nuns as my sponsors. Yeah. And well, I had
the real confirmation this time.
Yeah, real confirmation this time. And I had confession and nattvard Eucharist. Yes. So 4 sacraments. At one day, the people who said I was sort of sparkling, but. Well, then I went on with my life. I was at this point I was sort of retired, officially retired, because the state and doctors had declared that I didn't have to work or do anything in school for the rest of my life if I didn't want to, because then I can just stay there and be ill. Well, what happened is that. Emotionally, something began to happen, and intellectually, something began to happen, because I had felt all the time that I was dragged into Christianity sort of against my better judgment. Well, I began to change on a lot of views on moral, views on life, and all the things I had believed before that about were very idealistic, like, for example, the right to have an abortion, for example. Well, I saw that was horribly wrong, and also found it very intellectually stimulating to be a Catholic.
Again, studying the faith more deeply.
Yeah, studying the faith more deeply, yes. And I always found that there's something new to learn. There's a journey. To be Catholic, become a Catholic, and to be a Catholic is an everlasting journey into Christ and into the faith and everything. And
I was wondering.
Sorry.
That's all right. I was wondering if your music took a Catholic turn.
In my music, yes, I began to write more Christian music, and one thing really happened to my music because when I don't only write Christian songs. The ones I'm going to sing for you one later are Christians, but I found the old songs, they were heart, pain, life, depression, things like that. It's poor me. But then I began to write. I find out that when you have an artistic expression, it's quite important to have a responsibility, because some people can be so influenced by it. Yes. So you have a responsibility to keep hope, and no matter how much sadness there is there, you have to keep some hope. You have to have some light in what you do. I feel that's important. And emotionally too, I began to change actually, and now I'm much more stable person. Stable, is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and I'm much more peaceful, and people around me have seen this change. Sister Frances always at the monastery, she always says that she has seen this change in me, because I went to see her for once a week, almost all the time. Yeah, in addition to all the training. So,
I was going to say, there's a lot of things that can help us have that peace. Part of it is the sacramental graces that you receive there for the first time, 4 of them one time,
yeah,
and
that's
then receiving them every
But
Sunday.
I need the constant sacraments. It's so important for me I need a light of the church to come every Sunday, or more often than that, to sing Vesper with the sisters, for example. There's so much darkness in the world, and to have light is very important too.
That's right. And also, I was thinking that probably of course, the indwelling Holy Spirit that came in the midst of your baptism and confirmation and all of that. But I'm even wondering that just your relationship with Sister Frances and the other sisters has probably been a great encouragement to you in your spiritual life, as well as dealing with your illness, probably also, right? An encouragement for you to gain peace in the midst of meaning. It's
so important to have them there, this joyful congregation, this joyful group of smiling, happy, beautiful nuns. And then now they're actually going to make their convent larger, and so it's going to be more nuns there, so there's a possibility for more to come too. Yeah.
That's very exciting. And you've written some Catholic music, right?
Yes.
Tell us about a few of the themes of some of the songs.
Well, I must think. Well, I've written, for example, a happy summer song that you think you heard. That no, you haven't heard it. Sorry, it was someone else. Sorry. I wrote this happy summer song about the peace of Christ, and it's a joyful day. And I've written things about to stand there with an open hand and be afraid of what's coming next, but to trust the Lord. And I've written different songs, Christmas songs, and psalms, and.
Isn't it true that the Lord sometimes prepares us, each of us, with certain struggles, so that when we experience the grace of Christ, then we're also uniquely equipped to help other people who have a similar struggle. People out there that have the same struggle that you've had.
Which is quite important for me, and I feel that's sort of as a task to, both in my personal life and to what I'm going to do with my own life professionally, because now I'm going to because I'm now the state had declared me retired for life, but now I'm going to move to Oslo actually in the autumn, and I'm going to do some theology and Catholic theology at a special school in Oslo, and I just want to learn more just so I can, because when you experience mental pain and you grow from it and you get stronger, then you can you can join other people in their pain, and you're not afraid of their pain, you're not afraid of their fears, you're not afraid to meet them where they are. So one can achieve something, and yeah.
All right, and there's a scripture text in Colossians where Paul says, I rejoice in my sufferings because I complete what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ for the church. I mean, I'm sure that as you look at your own suffering in life, that there's a sense in which you appreciate the gift of suffering, which is hard to accept and rejoice in, but yet God uses your suffering to help others deal with their suffering, doesn't he, in a very powerful way?
I try to sort of suffer with Christ, and for Christ, I don't know how you say it, but that's very important to me, and I just want to bring some of my hope, because I have a new hope now to other people. Yeah.
All right. Well, Lita, thank you very much. You've done a very brave job sharing your journey with us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
And our prayers and blessings for you and your music and also your studies that are coming up. And I know in a little bit you're going to do some taping of some of your songs, so maybe we'll get a chance to hear them later.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, God bless you.
God bless you
Lita.
too.
And thank you for joining us on this special edition of The Journey Home here, taped in Oslo, Norway. God bless you. See you later.
Lord, I am standing here with an open hand. Nothing but fear, oh Lord, of this unknown land. But I know you are by my side, always and right now. Please help me to stand, my Lord, when the darkness comes. Carry me across, help me through this night. Carry me across, help me stand this fight. I know I am not alone, you are always there. The angels will guide my way with a tender care. Still I feel afraid sometimes when the darkness comes.